Hello, we are live. We are back. Thank you for joining Chavez Tech Talk once again. Again, we're trying something a little bit new to engage with sort of continuing on with the educational aspects of topics that you've brought to us. We've now changed up the format a little bit. We are doing a live type of thing again, as well as we're doing something a little bit different where we're sort of now doing a series of things that work together. So for this particular month, we are concentrating on what system integration is, sort of how that works with live event or live venues, as well as house of worship and some of those sort of things. So I would like to, first of all, I'd like to introduce my guest speakers today. Very much like to introduce Chris Barbie, who is Director of Sales and Installations at Bandit Lights. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Good.
And I'd also like to introduce Kyle Russellberg, who is a systems designer for E2I Designs. Hello, Kyle.
Hello.
And a man that needs no introduction, but I will do it anyway, is Michael Graham, whom is the product manager extraordinaire for Chavez. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I'm excited by this topic. It's one that I think, especially with sort of the times going on right now, it's very relevant because not a lot of live stuff is necessarily happening in terms of concerts and things, but what we have seen are a lot of different installations that were maybe already happening in progress or kind of have started to come about during this. So I think it's a relevant topic. There's a lot to go on here, as I'm sure you guys are aware. A system integration can start everywhere from a cruise ship to outdoor buildings to house of worship to live event concert halls. All of that extremely relevant, and all of it sort of works together. What I thought we'd kind of touch base on a little bit today, and then feel free to go any way that you want to, but is on more of the live aspects. And the reason for the two guest speakers, they're extremely knowledgeable in all things system integration and design, which we appreciate, but way smarter than me or Mike. Maybe not Mike, me. But I think it's nice to have that sort of like Chris. I know that you've done a lot of sort of live concert hall type things, aka House of Blues and sort of venues like that. And then Kyle, known you a long time as well, and you've done a lot with system integration towards House of Worship. Not only designing systems for it, but you've also been right there in the mix and sort of ran that a particular venue for a while. So kind of like to start, those areas. I don't mean to pigeonhole you into that. Please, feel free to engage all the way across, but maybe as we reference stuff, that'll be kind of how it's referenced. Throw live stuff at Chris and throw, House of Worship stuff to Kyle. But very open. And again, to everybody watching, we are doing this live. So we want to give you the opportunity to ask some questions, which I will definitely throw to the smart people and, sort of go along that way. So, Chris, I'll start with you. Okay. What's system integration? What's a system integrator? Why do we need it? Why do we want it?
All right. Thanks, Brad, and thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. So I was going to talk a little bit about the integration side of things as far as how it affects the concert halls, like what Brad was saying, as far as music venues and things like that. One of the things that we really try to do is, because of our experience with touring and live event stuff, we try to take that knowledge and integrate that into the permanent installs that we do. So we take a lot of that knowledge of being an end user in a venue, being the touring personnel, being the production guy on industrials and things. So taking all that information and making that a part of what goes into your venue. Because if we've taken all those kinds of things and thought about that, then using your venue in whatever way is going to be a whole lot easier. So kind of practical applications of that and things that we try to look at is snake runs and things like that. How do we get a snake from front of house to the backstage area? Because if we're just going to use the touring snake, then it's going to lay on the floor or up on hooks or something. So, hey, if we do some dry lines from front of house to backstage, if we do some things like that to not only backstage but to rack rooms and things like that, then it makes the life in the venue a heck of a lot easier.
Sure.
One of the other things that is a little bit more of the permanent install beast, but is a huge thing that we're seeing at this point is the architectural lighting aspect of whatever venue, whether it's a church, a school, or a performing arts center, whatever it is, that architectural lighting has gotten much more complicated than it used to be. It used to just be a lamp with a couple of wires, the electrician ran it, and you hooked it up and it dimmed. Well, now with 0 to 10 and DMX and DALI and all the various and the sundry ways that you can control things, the electrical contractors are pretty much at a loss. The electrical engineers that are supposed to be doing that work don't really know how it works. So they just put a note on the drawings that says the electrical contractors, responsible for making a working system. Well, that's great, but if they don't know how, then at the end of the project, you're kind of stuck. So, that's a big part of what we look at when we get involved in whatever project. And a lot of times we're not the ones figuring that out, but we're the ones adding the questions and saying, hey, have you thought about this? And do your house lights dim down to 0.1% or do they dim down to 10% and then shut off? So all those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure. And then, juxtapose that then, Kyle, to like a house of worship type setting. I mean, you've done not only been in a church, you've designed a church, you used to tour. So you have all that kind of experience too. How does that play into then the system integration side towards that particular endeavor?
Yeah, so the church has definitely changed from just being a fixed set it and forget it building, where we've really started to see them take on the live concert hall venue type style. So we're designing a performance hall that can do church. So we're looking at all the same things of, we need to do a huge youth event today, but then we need to flip it back to being, weekend ready, for Sunday church. So we're looking at all of those things of what's the easiest way to not go crazy, but give you a really good canvas to do just about anything in those venues. But we're also seeing a lot of patios pop up. A ton of people are moving their church service outside of the church. Obviously, this year that's been a huge thing.
Yeah,
so we've had to pivot with a bunch of our ministries to say, hey, you've got all this space over here. What if we, do a portable rig, and how does that integrate into your main building, so that maybe next year when you do have that conference, you now have overflow in the parking lot, or you can do a stage in the parking lot that ties in, and same thing with the architectural stuff. As an integrator, we get a design packet and we're looking through all of those things, okay, so we came in for this scope of work, but we're also kind of looking through all the other pages going, okay, we're probably going to touch that area. We're probably going to touch that, me being an end user, I want to touch that area. So let me be able to do that. And then, bring the right people to the table. So now that I'm on this side, I'm definitely combing through those documents going, hey, there's probably a better solution for this. I know it's not necessarily in our scope of work, but we could partner with you, or we could take that on to do a whole lot more that you're probably going to want 6 months after you open your doors.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, bring that all around to different aspects. Mike, from manufacturer side, there's a role that can be played there because a relationship often needs to exist. So we're putting the right type of fixtures in, those type of places.
Yeah, because a lot of it has to do with, thinking about it comes down to proper tool for proper job. In fixture design, a lot of times we think about, what is the most probable application for this product, and if that probable application is going to lean itself towards towards installation, we try to speak immediately with integrators and designers to kind of work with them to make sure that what we're putting together is going to work for their projects. You want to make sure that that when you're looking at, let's just take control, for example, you want to make sure that the fixture does take DMX, obviously. But if you're looking at larger systems where you're using SACN or ArtNet, having a fixture that can take those protocols in as well, and then chain them out, so that makes the whole wiring topology a little bit more simple, is definitely something that you want to think about from the get-go.
For sure, yeah. And so then, Chris, like when you're talking about how to, when you're choosing some of these ways to go, I mean, I know there's different ways to approach a lot of things, because you're either walking in because someone has an idea and they want that to come to life, or sometimes you're actually working with a designer who may came in and that may has pitched the idea to the client, and the client says, here's the pretty picture of what it looks like, how can you make that happen? Can you talk a little bit about how that relationship sort of works and the challenges or opportunities there as well?
Yeah. Sure. That we find ourselves, especially with a lot of the concert venue stuff that we do, we are taking those renderings that a designer has come up with and figuring out how to make it look like that. And honestly, the big challenge with that is the person that came up with the pretty picture, did they understand light or not? And because you see a lot of renderings these days that are beautiful. I mean, they're great. They've done an amazing job, but you'll never be able to actually make it look like the rendering, because light doesn't work that way. So they may have something lit and it's like, okay, where's your light for that? Well, it's over here. Okay, well, how do we do that in real life? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, you can't put the light where we put it. And it's like, exactly. So that's a big part of it. So that's one of the things that we, as we get involved in the early stages of projects, we do try to guide. And we're not necessarily going to come up with a pretty picture, but we're going to at least try to inform the architect or the designer that's involved to say, hey, think about when you put that light in your rendering software, where you put it, and can you put a light there? So it's one thing to turn up the sun inside the building so that everybody can see the architectural details, and that's great. And so long as you quantify it and say, hey, this is to see the detail, this isn't going to be what it looks like. So it's one of the things that we really pride ourselves on, and it gives us that bit of joy, is that when we can go back to a rendering that was done 18 months ago and we finished the project and we look at the picture of the actual view, it looks like the rendering. And when we've done that, we've done our job, and everybody's happy, and it's why we do it. So when we're working with a designer, that's one of the things that we try to do. If there's not a designer involved, then we start trying to guide that conversation with the client from the standpoint of common experiences or shows that they've seen, or we can point to the Garth Brooks concert and say, how we did this with that, or you look at WWE and you saw this, or you looked at this concert, whatever it is, then that's kind of the language and the approach that we use with it to try to realize. But that can be challenging, because a lot of the people in those situations, they may have some kind of entertainment experience that they know everything about that, but they don't know how to market it. They don't know how the light works, and things like that. So we're doing a little bit of education there as well, teaching them,
for sure,
what's going to have some impact to what they're doing.
Yeah. So. And I imagine, Kyle, on the flip side, from maybe a house of worship setting, you have a different element come in where you may have a pastor that you have to kind of bring in as pseudo designer, because as you mentioned earlier, you have so many different maybe functionalities of it, that not only are you lighting for the contemporary or the live music aspect of it, but you have a message that you have to think about in lighting that area as well. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship and sort of the challenges there?
Yeah, we're definitely hitting that pastor, ministry, worship pastor, creatives who have seen a lot of things but don't know how to put it into words or even a doodle. So we come with the mindset of focusing on the why we're going to do something versus on how we're going to do it. And You know, a lot of ministries will say, hey, I watched this live stream yesterday and I want to do that. Well, that might not fit your building. It might not fit your congregation. It might not fit the area that you go in, and you're going to shock all your congregants with this big rock show that looked great on your computer screen, but it just doesn't fit. So we definitely try and say, hey, you're not a construction guy, you're not a designer. We're not going to try and force you to be there. We want to be that partner with you. All of us come from ministry backgrounds, so we've all worked in the church, so we kind of understand that. We bring that to the table. A lot of guys I work with, you know, my background is lighting and lighting design, but I've done the audio side as well and the touring side. So I get that, hey, we can do these things in phases, you know, and that's a key phrase that a lot of the church world jump on, because they're like, hey, you know, we're all donation funded, so we might not be able to do these bigger budget pieces. But if we can take their vision and say, hey, I just want this to look a little bit more attractive. The content's good, you know, everyone loves the content. It's just now we need to make it a little bit prettier and maybe appeal to a younger audience. So we come along them and show them like, hey, here's what this is doing. Hey, this video you showed me, here's what this product is. Here's why they picked it. And bring in other designers as well that we have a relationship with that can come in and paint those pretty pictures, you know. Definitely, like Chris said, you can get a picture and a render that's gorgeous, and just because you can draw it in a computer doesn't mean it's physically possible in the real world. And that's a conversation that you just have to walk backwards in and going, you know, hey, it's great. Yep. We're not saying it's not great. We're just saying your building probably isn't the best fit doing some of those things or the challenges. But we like to make the complicated simple. You know, we're working with volunteers and bivocational guys, and you may have a tech team of one. So our training is where we really shine in that area of like coming alongside of them, showing them what we're going to do, bringing them alongside while we're doing it. Because there's nothing like ownership of going, I know where that cable goes. I know how that pipe was hung. I know how the fixture was on because I was there helping do it.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's a good point. A nice phrase that you brought up was doing it in phases and different things like that. So, you know, I know this is a bit of open question, but I'll go back to you, Chris. Like when you're starting, because there's different facets, I have to believe, to when you start. Like you could come in on a new build, you could come way later in a refurb or even a renovation. Like, how do you start? I mean, obviously talking to the client and things like that, but what is the main, I guess, goal when you're trying to put those things together and you talk about phases and different things? And I know money plays in.
Yeah. You know, it depends on, you know, it depends on the project. It's very project specific. But, you know, we start by trying to identify what is the long-term goals of, you know, the use of the space, and how do we accomplish those long-term goals? But usually, because there isn't enough money on the front end, you know, how do we do that in phases, as you said, you know, and so what we really try to do is we try to look at that infrastructure. So if we've got the infrastructure in place to support the long-term goals, then we can add bits and pieces as we go. We can add a system of you know, moving lights, and we've already got the infrastructure there to deal with it, power and data and everything. And then we can look at doing, you know, the floor package, or we want to, you know, we build onto it at that point, and whether that's a you know, from a flexible performance lighting system type situation to even architainment where we're doing, you know, permanent install, you know, hardwired everything and all that. It all becomes a matter of what's that end goal, what's the total thing that we want to do. And a lot of times what we will do is we'll know going in that, yeah, they want to get to that end goal in this phase, but it's not going to be possible. So we try to build it in such a way that, okay, here's what it would be if you do want to get there, but here's where we could trim a little bit back and make it something that's affordable now, and then still be able to build on it and not have thrown money down the drain. So
For sure, for sure. And I imagine, Kyle, when I'm assuming here, but I imagine a lot of times, a church or, some of their staff might see a concert or another hall that looks amazing. And you're doing a lot of retrofitting of trying to bring that system into maybe a building that they already have. So infrastructure is probably one of the first conversations you have to have and kind of set the expectations that way. But then there's also, youth rooms in different places. Do you try to plan to where if I'm using fixtures here, they can be upgraded into that space later? Well, that upgrades. I mean, if you could talk a little bit about that, I think that's another place in the integrator really plays into being very valuable.
Yeah, I'll answer it with an integrator perspective and then an end user kind of perspective.
Perfect.
From the integrator, I always go in with my sandbox. We obviously know that we've got a building, we've got a timeline, we've got a budget, we've got a design, we've got all those things. How do they work together? Do we need to push it this way? Do we need to push it this way? Where does that expand, and how do we attack it? But we kind of write all those things, throw it all in the sandbox so everyone knows here's the tools that we're playing with. Is there anything that we're missing here? And then we start with infrastructure. Phase A for us is always infrastructure. Like, do you have anything there, that's usable? Are you, an old AMX system? Do you not even have DMX in your system? Do we have to gut those things? Is there no power? Do we have to pull power? Because there's no sense in, trying to do a huge lighting rig when you've got two 20 amp circuits for the entire sanctuary.
Yeah.
We just did a building a week ago that was, built in the 70s, and it fought us the whole week, and literally barely got by with the power that was in the building. The electrician was like, well, that's all we got. So yeah, but yeah, we look at, okay, you're focusing on the main auditorium. You want to bring that up. You want to, get rid of your PAR 64s and finally go into LED or something like that. Hey, well, these PAR 64s aren't garbage. Maybe we can use those down in the kids' room. Maybe we can use them in outdoors on a stage somewhere that, maybe you're doing a Christmas thing and, you're going to have a bunch of fire pits and do s'mores or whatever you're going to do for Christmas, and you just need parking lot lights. You can throw those up pretty easily.
Yeah.
So we try and tackle that all over the place, and we do a lot of church plants. So where you do that, church in a box, and now they've moved into their auditorium. Now they got all this gear that doesn't fit that auditorium. Well, if we're going to do a church plant, we're going to say, hey, all this stuff is actually your youth room. Right now it's your main service, but when you get that building, all of this gear is going to go into that youth room. So you're not having to buy another main auditorium and another youth room kit. This is your youth room kit. Your team knows it, your staff knows it. So anyone who walks into your youth room is going, oh, this is super familiar.
Yeah.
All we have to do is now train them on the main auditorium stuff, which is going to be similar gear. From an end user standpoint, I'm looking at integrators that can do that, who ask those questions. Don't give me the lip service and the yes just because you want the business, but really challenge me on the why. Why do you want that there? Why do you need that there? When are you ever going to use that? Because cable's probably the cheapest part of the project, but you start slinging that through there, there's a lot of labor that goes into slinging all that cable, and you may never use that patch point. You may never use, this stuff in your lobby, but now we just put it there. So I'm looking at the guys that have the background in the touring / install world, because that's what church is. And they have products that I've seen from their installs that fit my need. And they're not just going to say, this is the product you need, and this is what you're getting. Well, is there anything else out there? As long as I can have a conversation, and they're really explaining it to me. I never just want to be handed a design. I want to really feel like my voice is valued, especially when it comes to phases. Like, yeah, I'm all good for doing it in phases, but right now I have to see my pastor on stage. So key light has to be in phase 1. We might not get eye candy and we might not get a haze machine or, the kids room. That's fine. But I got to go live on Sunday and I can't see a shadow.
For sure. I think that's a good point. And I think it's a good, transition to, talking about, again, an open question, but we can keep it kind of narrow, but like, what kind of lights to use? And when I ask that, I don't mean, hey, let's use, these type of lights, but what is the relationship like between an integrator and a manufacturer? That's very important. I mean, obviously I can speak from manufacturer side, and then we'll get, definitely Mike involved there, is we try to make a product that is great for everybody, which is always kind of hard. It's one that's rock and roll, one that's good for house worship, one that's good for this. But, when you walk into it, Chris, what's important to you from, an integrator side, having that relationship back to the manufacturer? Obviously, sometimes you'll use a bunch of different manufacturers for it, but do you like to keep it as a system so you kind of have that, or is it really just depend on the situation?
I think for the most part, it depends on the situation.
Sure.
We try to kind of stay in, to keep things, especially within systems. So, prime example being Rogue Wash 1 and Rogue Wash 2, that kind of thing of, you're going to do a small wash fixture and a large wash fixture. We're going to keep them in that same vein so that the colors match, and so we want to try to stay that way. However, then you get into, okay, well, you want a spot fixture, and depending on features and all that, or there's some kind of specific effect fixture. There's in our current kind of what we do in some of the venues with a spot fixture, a wash fixture, and a beam fixture. The spot and the wash fixtures are yours, and the beam fixture is somebody else's because you don't have the beam fixture we want. So that's what we run into. So, but we try not to be like scattered and do the, a fixture from every different manufacturer to try, it increases everybody's work as far as, how many purchase orders you got to write, how many people you got to contact about, shipping, how many, and then from an end user standpoint, how many different people do you have to chase down when you've got a problem, and if it's, if you've got a bunch of different manufacturers, you start getting the, pointing at everybody else if there is some kind of issue. So we definitely try to stay, not necessarily with a single manufacturer, but we definitely try to stay with products that we've used in that way, and we've integrated in, and we know it's going to work. And if we see some kind of weirdness with DMX or something like that, we know where to look and who to call. Mike Graham's going to be at the top of the list for Chavez. If we see something weird, we're going to call him, and he's they do that all the time. So yeah.
Yeah. Kyle, anything there? I mean, honestly, what are you looking for in fixtures too? I mean, obviously you want to have stuff that's energy efficient. Are there other trends that are out there that you're seeing that maybe need to thought about more?
Yeah. So I definitely don't want it to look like a garage sale. Because then that's just training, another volunteer on like, well, this is how this menu works. And well, this one works totally different. And these two guys actually don't really like to be in the same chain as each other.
Yeah.
I mean, when RDM was first coming out, all these fixtures were just like throwing it out like crazy, and you'd have to track down, oh, that's where it's coming. It's just broadcasting on weird lines. And, oh, there's where you turn it off. And, volunteer's not going to do that on Sunday morning. He's just going to know. He's going to call us and go, hey, it's freaking out. And what do I do? And I'm just waking up going, huh? Okay. So I'm looking at manufacturers that have a very deep product line. And when I say that, meaning not just so they have an effect light, wash light, you know, some eye candy strips or strobes or things like that, but something that I can go to a kid's room with all the way up to the main auditorium, and the lifespan's there. You know, hey, we threw this out there. We don't know how long we're going to keep it around. You know, it's doing pretty good, but you know, it'll probably not make it more than 5 years. You know, I look at beam quality. I know in years past, me and you, Brad, have gone back and forth on. I just don't like the build. It's horrible. And they're like, "What are you seeing?" I'm like, "I'm seeing this little thing right here," and you're like, "Oh my lord," you know. But you know,
I don't disagree. No.
But that's me having that conversation with you in the past. I felt like you heard me, and I was like, you know what? He hears me. He's giving me things, so I'm more apt to use your product at the time. And so I want to be able to take that to my clients and say, hey, this product is going to be around. We've tested it. We value it. We're moving tons and tons into LED. I mean, there's not a real reason not to be there. My biggest thing is binning issues, you know, or engines. How long is that engine? Is that a prototype engine that y'all are just testing out? Is it, you know, where do you foresee that happening? Because I've definitely had some fixtures that have been make or break, and you know, there's 4 or 5 different variations of that engine, and you can never really get them to match up as much as you want to paint it. The color is just off. So that's a nerdy thing, you know, but that's definitely something that I'm looking at before I pitch it to someone else. Those are the
which makes a big difference when you look at the overall picture. What do you think, MG?
Well,
Well,
so one of the things I look at, so from my personal background, I worked on cruise ships. I did systems with an integration company for a while. Worked with another company that did integration on cruise ships, and then came to Chevet. So for me, when I'm developing a product, I'm trying to come at it from a standpoint of a user and say, okay, well, does this menu map make sense? Can I navigate this no matter how tired I am or how frustrated I am? Can I navigate this easily? And if the answer is yes, then I'm happy. But I'm trying to develop gear that is kind of set up for anyone to use. You know, when it comes to everything from DMX personalities to menu settings to software to how RDM works to all these things. You know, our goal is to make it as seamless and easy as possible. Sometimes that means a bit more work on our side, but in the end, it's worth it because chances are good that that one of the guys in the PD team at Chevet is going to be using this on a gig sometime, because we all also work out in the field every so often. It's not all the time or as much as we'd like to, but we still get our hands dirty in the field because that keeps us relevant in the office. So like, you know, if I'm using a fixture that it's like it has this quality, that quality, that's pretty cool. I'll think about that on my next build project. I think that comes into play quite a bit. As far as like, you know, LED choice and LED binning and that kind of thing, we work super hard with LED suppliers, LED manufacturers, engine manufacturers. And I will say that going from a lamped world into the LED world, there is a massive amount of change. For example, if you go back a few years and look at fixtures that were using MST 250 lamps, so that's you know, some of the Martin fixtures, Roby stuff, Claypaky, Comar, whomever it was, Chevet, using those 250 lamps. Well, every fixture that used that lamp, the optical system was almost exactly the same. And you can still buy MSD 250 lamps. I mean, they've been out for 20 years or more. The challenge with LEDs is that LED manufacturers just make changes. They decide that they're going to change the engine, and then we have to react to it. And that means either it's a V2 or it's a discontinue or it's a new build or whatever. And our goal is to not discontinue a fixture because of an LED. And not to use one of our fixtures as an example, but I'm going to anyways. Rogue R2 wash into R2X wash. We were notified by Osram, the LED manufacturer, about a year before they were going to discontinue the LED. So they said, hey, we're going to discontinue this LED. We have a new one coming. It's not quite finished yet, but these are the properties of it. So we sat down, had a hard think. Okay, so the R2 wash is super popular. We move through a lot of those, and it's a really great fixture. What do we do? And the answer was, okay, we've already been through this with the R1 and R2X wash. We developed a legacy mode. So we went back to Osram. We said, that's cool. You can go ahead and discontinue this LED, but the red that you change to has to be the same, the green the same, the blue the same, the white the same. And we have to be able to, do some other software tricks with it to make sure that it matches what we already have out there. So in doing that, we were able to, because, in the installation world, there's a lot of those fixtures out there. So we made it so that you could do a legacy mode inside the fixture, and to be able to match what you already had in the rig. And we did some other things with the R2X wash, which aren't that important right now. But the whole thing comes down to how we as a manufacturer deal with those changes. When those changes come up, how do we effectively put that back into the market so that we don't put specifically with installation companies, put them in a bad spot where they have to go back to, so let's say, Church of the whatever decides to expand their rig and add a bunch more fixtures in. They want to go with the same light, and we still have it, so it has to match what's already in there, or be very close to it, or have a way to get to where it was. And that's a big challenge for us.
Yeah, for sure. And one question I had is, as we're talking about fixtures, and I was thinking back about what you said, Kyle, is sort of the emergence over the last couple of years of IP65 based fixtures. And usually you look at that and you think, oh, well, those can only be used outdoors. But really, because of the design of it, they could be an ideal situation where if you need to stick something way up somewhere where, it's a high dust area, or it's next to pyro, or it's next to something like that. Or as you were mentioning, in patios, have either of you seen sort of a new emergence or need for that type of fixture, or is it just kind of too early yet until we see more? I guess I'll start with you, Kyle.
Yeah, I definitely have looked at them more than I ever have, just with this year and all the patios and outdoor. Yes, a trash bag and a zip tie keeps the fixture somewhat protected from the dew and stuff. But I definitely have seen myself looking in those product range more and going, hey, there's nothing keeping me from putting it indoors. And there's actually been some times where I haven't been able to get a hold of a certain type of fixture I wanted, but the IP fixture was available.
Oh, yeah.
And it functions the same. It's just a little bit more closed. So I wouldn't say that there's a huge need for it outside of the patio thing for me. But I love that there's more and more of that coming available. Because there's some indoor fixtures that have just been awesome. It's like, man, if it was just a little bit more IP rated, I could use it in other ways.
Yeah. What about you, Chris?
I think I'd say the same thing. We use IP rated fixtures inside a lot for what we do. When we get into a lot of the venues that we do, there's a lot of liquid involved, whether that's mopping floors or spilt drinks or whatever. So there are a lot of times where having an IP rated, a outdoor rated fixture inside is very beneficial. Now, that becomes a little bit tricky with, like the old school, Colorados and stuff that had the proprietary connectors and everything on them. that becomes problematic to start trying to integrate different things in with it and everything. But with the direction that most everybody's moved, at least with the IP65 stuff, which is kind of a sweet spot for us, is we're using True One and IP rated DMX cable, and it works pretty well, and is workable inside and is easy to integrate. So, yeah.
So as all those, we've talked about all these different things that a fixture can then do, and then, the way to control. Last but not least, from a sort of a gear standpoint, is how does control play an aspect in system design? And we don't have to talk about specific, consoles or things like that, but I imagine that you all have to think about that kind of from a starting point, because you're going to have volunteers, you're going to have people that need to come in. Like, how do you approach that? Because you can have all the cool lights in the world, but if you can't necessarily manipulate them or turn them on as part of that system, they could be a little challenging. I'll start with you, Chris, on that.
That is a huge thing, and we do have to start there pretty much, because one of the things that we're all facing, with the different Ethernet protocols and MANet and Net3 from ETC and streaming ACN and all that, there are some devices that just can't talk to some of those. So figuring out what that control front end, because if you're going to be MA, then there's definitely some concern here, not some criteria as to how to build that system. If you're going to be doing it with ETC, there's other, and when you start integrating, from a former life, and this as we were doing Follow Me and ETC systems, and Follow Me wants to be ArtNet and ETC really wants to be streaming ACN right now. So, how do we make those things go together? So it's a very, very important, and it's a big gotcha for if you're trying to put it together yourself and you're not aware of a lot of those things, it can become problematic pretty quick.
So. Sure. Yeah. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, it's for us, we try not to pick logos. We pick the right console and control system for the job. Doing a lot of older buildings, we've been finding that a lot of these new consoles, just the DMX speed is way too fast. And that you would never think of. And you can't always just go in and rip out an old dimmer rack as much as you'd like to ever have to service or deal with it again. You just can't do it. So there's all those things that you have to play in and say, okay, what's downstream of this? Not just from a user standpoint, but what else is talking to it. We're not so much in the make it tour friendly. So anyone who comes through can work on it. We work on what's going to be the easiest one to get a volunteer up and running on. And we've got really good classes for just about all of them out. I mean, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Brad. And what you're seeing with the campuses and stuff. And so I'm always out there playing on the consoles. I'm a programmer, so I definitely have my console of choice. But again, from my touring days, it was like, I'm going to push buttons on any console that gets me on a bus. I'm not going to be super picky. And not everyone has the clout to say, I'm not doing the tour unless I have this console, or I'm not, running lights if I don't have this console. So try and touch it just about everything out there and say, okay, what workflow works best for here? Especially even when it comes to architectural stuff. Is it going to play well with your system? From an on-off or presets or networking, do you have to be an IT guru to run your lighting system?
For sure. Yeah.
And also working with IT companies, or the end users IT, because for some reason they just like to control every switch, every Cat5 cable that comes into the building. You're like, nope, it's not seeing the world. It's seeing that light up there and it's seeing this board. And they're like, well, we're going to have to handle all the IP schemes and stuff. And you're like, okay. So,
which I think is another value of an integrator coming in, because now more than ever, especially the system layout, the console, the fixtures, you need to be more network savvy to make a lot of that work, because it's spilling not just from the stage, but into house lighting and into wall stations and things like that. So I think that's another, place where having an integrator be able to handle that is definitely a good thing. What do you think, Mike? You have any?
We can have those fights too. We always say we can have those fights too. We can push back on the GC. We can push back on the EC and say, no, like, this isn't right. It's not right, and this is how it needs to be done. We're there to protect our end user, and if the integrator is not fighting for you, you need to.
You need a new integrator.
For sure.
That's what we're there for. We're there for them to be pastors, be ministers, be the end user that they're supposed to be, and us be the integrator, be the guy that gives them the system that they want and need. And we joked yesterday about like HVAC and everything else. We're the ones who go, no, it's got to move, or this has to go there, and acoustics, playing with them, and that's what the integrator is there for. And you should be able to have that report to go, hey man, this is the sword I'm willing to die on, and I need you to go run with it and fight for me. And there's a lot of good integrators that should be doing that for you and do. But if they're not, also.
For sure.
Yeah.
So going back to the networking question, so oftentimes when I do get phone calls from end users, and they say, hey, my lights are flipping out. Okay, so are you on a network? Yes, I am. You're running ArtNet or SACN? Well, yeah, I am. Okay, so what else is on the network? Well, my printer. Wait, what? Yeah, my printer's on it. My TV. So I've got Hulu running in the other room or whatever. It's like, whoa. So let's get all that off your network. Well, no one told me I couldn't do that. Well, who did you ask? Well, I looked it up. I put it on Facebook. Oh, okay. So let's just back up a little bit. And to me, this is why I love integrators. This is where integrators help on the manufacturer side so much, because they're going to stop the end user from making these mistakes. And it's not because end users don't know, it's because they just don't know. They don't understand that it's not like an office network. It's not like your home network. This is a specific network. And on that specific network, there should be ArtNet, SACN, and that's pretty much it, in my opinion, in a lighting network. If you are going to run, I guess you can run audio down the same trunk if you want to, but I personally would rather that you didn't. But yeah, that's the thing is you're I think that one of the integrator's biggest job is to stop end users from making incredibly bad decisions, even though it's made with the best of intentions. That's kind of what they're there for, because on the manufacturer side, that saves us a lot of time and heartache in trying to figure out what problems are, because it's always on the fifth phone call that you find out that, oh, well, I'm also playing Fortnite on this thing too. It's like, well, what are you doing? And that's kind of the thing. And that if the venue can stick to what the integrator suggests, then it's always a lot easier for us as well.
Yeah. Our friend Jake came up with a nice saying, turn off RDM, which is pretty funny, but it's an interesting, point of that conversation too. Do you guys see a lot of need for those who don't know what RDM is? It's a remote device management, having the ability to, I mean, it's very helpful when you're setting things up, obviously, or just need to get some feedback, but do you feel a need to be able to do that a lot in an installation? Chris?
It depends on whether the fixture's got a user interface or not. That's what it's really boiled down to for us, is now with a lot of the architectural products, there is no user interface on it at all. So you have to do it from some kind of RDM or whatever proprietary flavor sometimes somebody comes up with,
right.
But you are having to do it. And to be honest, we have seen a significant amount of issues with RDM causing problems with control and random things. A few years ago, we had a bunch of wash fixtures at a venue, and we had RDM on, and the whole rig, about every 5 minutes, would just do like this little stutter, just a little flash. We couldn't figure out what it was for the longest time, and finally, just kind of process of elimination, we turned off RDM on the gateway, and magically they stopped doing it. So it's those kind of little idiosyncrasies that the integrators, because we deal with it every day, we know, and we know where to go check and where to go look. Kyle's point about DMX speed. For those of us that have been doing this for a long time, that we all know about DMX speed, because that used to be a big thing. Well, now with the newer products, it's not really a huge issue, but it is when you have to integrate that older demo rack or that older piece of gear in there. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm same boat. I turn it off at most times. It's nice to identify, like a lot of the architainment stuff. It's just the fastest, easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
But if I know, it's one of those things where you're going through your whole like demo or your product spill, and you're like, it can do this, and then this mode, and then this mode, and then it can do speak Clang, or it can speak this or this or this, and ArtNet and RDO, and you just got to move past it, and because techs are going to poke around and touch everything. The fact that you can do a lot with RDM and then be stumped to get back to where you just were, and there's just not a real standard for it yet. I mean, how long have we been arguing the RDM standard? It's just you start mixing flavors, and it just and you can't fix it with a terminator.
No.
So we'll use it for setup and identifying things, and then once it's all set up, we generally will go back and explain what it is and why we did it. You don't really ever need to touch it.
Yeah. So then, kind of piggybacking on that question, which was another question that came through, which I think is pretty interesting, is thoughts on wireless on installation, like doing some sort of wireless control DMX. There's obviously room for it in certain places. Chris, what kind of experience have you had with that? Do you recommend it? Only certain situations?
We occasionally use it. We try to stay away from wireless whenever possible, just because it can be finicky, and it's so dependent on, the locale that you're going to install it in. So, if we're going to go do something at a big, let's say Grand Ole Opry, there's a little bit of wireless going on inside that building. So, to do wireless DMX on top of anything else, are we doing it some places? Yes. Is it what we want to do? No, not necessarily, but sometimes it's what we're forced into. So, we use it very sparingly, and when we do use it, we try to go do as much as we can ahead of time to make sure that we're not going to have any gotchas. So, if it's a temporary event kind of thing, sure, but do you really want your entire house light system to be wireless, and deal with that struggle when something goes badly? So,
what do you think?
I always go back to my audio days of, if it doesn't have to be wireless, don't make it wireless. So if I can plug it in, plug it in. I'm the same boat. A lot of these portable churches will do it on where, they just, either a fire marshal's like, you got to go over every doorway, or this or that, or speed, and it's a simple setup. Yeah. But a lot of these fixed installations at churches, I mean, there's so much RF going on. You've got giant LED walls now. You've got, 40 plus wireless mics. Why introduce it? We've done some set carts that needed to roll out, that were on battery backups and stuff that were there. But it was essentially to get them on stage. And then once they hit on stage and they all clicked together, they went back onto essentially shore power, where it was a hardline DMX and power for it. But they wanted this pretty lit thing to come on set and do the transition, and we had to do it by wireless. If in temporary setups, but most of our fixed installations, we're going to hardline it no matter
For
how
sure.
hard it is to get it there.
And Mike, do you have any comment here? I mean, I know a lot of our fixtures incorporate wireless, but
yeah. So for me, think about this. If you're walking through a building and you're on the phone, so when your phone drops out, you just make the call back, right? Because inevitably when you're walking through a grocery store or something like that, your phone's going to drop out, or if there's a lot of RF noise. Wireless is kind of the same thing. The environment determines how well your wireless work. And the thing is, before you hit doors, wireless will work perfectly every time. And as soon as the house fills up, all of a sudden your wireless doesn't work so well, because not only is your wireless network out there, but every single cell phone in the room is also looking for service, or looking for this or looking for that. And it just clogs up the air. I mean, I think that if you could visibly see wireless networks, no one would ever use them, because there's so much clutter in the air with a wireless network that for me, in a pinch, great. On a one-off, phenomenal. For battery products, yeah, sure, that makes sense. But for a show that I'm permanently installing, wherever I can avoid it, I will.
Yes, yeah.
And
Well,
it's
guys, I
amazing
do.
how many point of sales machines are out there that are like the Wild West. They'll broadcast on anything and everything, and
Yes.
all kinds of issues.
It's very interesting, guys. I really appreciate this. I kind of want to bring it around home. I think a lot of this was very intriguing and very helpful to a lot of people. I kind of want to end it on a question, which is, I'll start with you, Chris, because you're a storyteller. Kind of give us, number 76, if you will, of what is your favorite installation. You don't have to say venue names or whatever, just your favorite experience. And then what is your most challenging experience that you've had? And sort of, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot there.
I think I could probably wrap it up in one. But the answer to that is both of it. It's the same venue, same project, and that was the flood in Nashville in 2010. So that flood put 4 feet of water on stage at the Grand Ole Opry, and all the sublevels and the first floor of the Opryland Hotel underwater. So putting that back, we were lucky enough to be called on by the folks at the Opry and Tyler Bryan over there to go in and assess everything and figure out how to put it back. And it was tough. That was in May, and they reopened the Opry 10 years ago. 2 days ago, September 28th, 10 years ago. So it's the 10-year anniversary of reopening the Opry. And John Jenkinson, one of our senior project managers, and I did that project together. And we spent 6 months in Nashville working on the ground there and doing everything. And so every day was something new, because you had to figure out how to take this flooded building that the first step was a team of 200 people with sawzalls and shovels, cut everything at 4 feet above the stage level in the Opry House, and didn't, there's no path, there's no, hey, where did this go? It just stops. So it was a huge challenge, and but came off without a hitch pretty much at the end for the opening, and then the hotel opened about a month later. And it was so
and seeing it afterwards, very awesome. I mean, it's an amazing project for you.
Very that was one of those that we went from kind of old school DMX distribution with lots of splitters and all that, and going to now a much heftier network presence and new console and lots of gateways to be able to distribute DMX and deal with the events coming in when they have because they use their desk a lot of times, but then they also do a lot of events that come in that bring in their own gear. So that space is challenging, but it has evolved very nicely and matured very nicely over the years. So
awesome. Yeah. What about you, Kyle?
I'll say my favorite, not favorite, but like meaningful one was probably the Gateway one. Their large 114 campus. You were very heavily involved in that one.
Yeah.
But from that one, it kind of really established that okay, I can do this as a designer. I can. I've done one under my belt with Chris and his team, and then moving on into this one, it was really understanding like okay, here's all the parts and pieces of being a designer and how to get that to architects' hands and seeing it come to life. It was like okay, I'm stepping out of touring into this new season, and um, it's still standing. So that's always a fun one to look back at that. And then I say probably the challenging one. We did a church out in San Francisco. That was built in 1927. No drawings, no plans, a ton of plaster, and the hardest wood you could ever drill through. And there was just like no infrastructure, no conduit, no nothing that we we got to retrofit it and bring all the fixtures up and to LED, but still make them look old. And we got to hide all the technology, but still accent the old building. And it was definitely a fun one, but probably one of the most challenging ones I've done. And I've been under a lot of floors, but this building is just it wasn't going to go easy any day we got there.
That's pretty awesome, especially those older buildings when you do that, and even though it was challenging, and then you make it look like something totally different with everything hidden. It's pretty magical. You know, it really plays in the magic of what you do. So, Mike, you've done quite a few yourself. What about yourself? Do you have any favorites? And
man, yeah, I did a lot of cruise ship stuff. So with the ship work, it's every ship is different, but I guess my favorite cruise ship story, we were doing an install in Italy, and so I get into the showroom in the morning, and where my console should be sitting, it's not there. And I'm like, huh, that's odd. Who's going to steal a 3-foot long, 45-pound console? So I looked out in the house, and there's 2 electricians carrying my console around the house. And I saw them kneel down and then stand back up and move, kneel down, stand back up and move. I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing? We're testing the outlets. What? You took my console to test outlets? Yes, because it takes power, and we can just plug it in. I'm like, no. Please bring back my console. So that I mean, true story. That's probably my best. That's probably the best installation story that I can tell right now. But yeah, that was fun. But ships were challenging. Whether it was a retrofit, new build, or whatever, just because you're dealing with so many different contractors. You know, there's the audio contractor, the architect, the shipyard, and whatever. And, you know, everybody speaks a different language. Everybody has a different concept. And, you know, everybody just trying to push towards the same goal. That helped me you know, in where I am now, because those were struggle. Those were always a struggle. And I find that now, you know, taking that knowledge and working on jobs with you guys makes it a lot easier, just from having to go through that. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, I've been kind of sort of monitoring the questions. I haven't seen much more. So I think I'll kind of wrap it up there, guys, because I really appreciate your time. I mean, I think this conversation and where we've gone with it can help a lot of people, especially if they're starting from scratch or starting with something that they're getting ready to do, thinking about that there is help out there, thinking about all the issues they may have not thought about, that, you know, people like yourself are thinking about, makes a big difference. So I think I'll wrap it up there. For everybody at home, thank you for watching. This video will be available in some format online to be on the YouTube channel. I think in a couple of days is usually how I do it. If you want to get in touch with Chris or Kyle, who are extremely great resources for all things that they've talked about today, I believe you can either, you know, look them up in the chat here and they'll be able to respond back to you, or many of you probably know them anyway, as long as you guys are okay with that, so you can get flooded with questions. I know you guys are great and always willing to help, and that's really what makes you guys, great at what you do. So on a little programming note, we will be here next Thursday as well. I am going to sort of pass the moderator keys on to my friend Mike Graham there, who is going to talk a little bit about dive into some of more of the alphabet soup that we just talked about, like UL listings and what some of those type of things mean, because they really make a big difference in these installation type of things. I, as a shameless plug, am going to be embarking on the Visions Unleashed Roadshow. So I do encourage you, if you are in Charlotte, North Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Dallas, Texas, or Houston, Texas, within sometime in the month of October, we are coming to see you, and we're going to do it in a nice, safe way, as safe as we can, because we very much believe in that and know that that's very important to a lot of people. But it's our chance to re-engage with you all and show you some new gear and all of that sort of thing. So anyway, small plug there. Thank you guys so much. Chris, any last thoughts?
Nope, all good here.
Good. Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. Mike, thank you for also being here as well. And we'll see you soon. Thank you, guys.
Keep,
Later.